Good morning, Facebook friends and my diet buddies. It is Patricia Dacre, and I am the founder and owner of Better Diabetes Life, which is a company dedicated to providing support for the other side of diabetes, which is the hard part, the emotional stuff, the dealing with it, the struggle, all the stuff that goes on in your head that keeps you from being your best. And today I wanted to talk with you and ask you a question about your strategy for dealing with frustration. So when we go see the doctor, we always talk about what are we doing about diet and exercise and how are we going to count our carbs and what medicine we're going to take, all that business. But what are you doing about frustration? Because to me, that's one of the biggest barriers to doing what you need to do, because we all get frustrated. It's too hard. It doesn't play fair. It's not doing what we expect it to do, and we just get frustrated, right? And when we get frustrated, we don't want to keep doing it. It makes sense, right? We don't want to keep doing that. So I always feel like frustration is one of the biggest barriers to doing what you need to do. So we really need to have a strategy. Like, what are you going to do when you get frustrated? How do you get over it? Because honestly, it could be a really big barrier. So just knowing that it's going to be there, let's talk a little bit about what you can do. Okay, and there's several things. I'll go in kind of no specific order, but one is expectations. So if we think about the expectations our medical practitioners have for us, they're very specific, right? We want your blood sugar in this range. We want your numbers in this range. We want you to eat this way, to exercise so many times. And they always, and this is me as a nurse, we give best case scenario. Here's the pie in the sky, perfect thing you can do. So, is it possible to be perfect all the time? Well, heck no, nobody can, right? It's just the way of the world. And so if our expectation is that we're going to meet everything that anybody else sets out for us and we're going to live up to those expectations, we will fail early and often. We'll fail a lot. And so I always tell folks, what we really want to do is we don't want to try for perfection, because we'll fail, we'll miss the mark, and diabetes won't play fair, and some days our numbers won't make sense. But what we can do is to be persistent, right? And persistence is that act of, even if it didn't work yesterday, today I'm going to play the game again. And I think that's a really good strategy to have, is to deal with today. Because yesterday, what you did yesterday, your blood sugars could be all crazy. Today it works, tomorrow it doesn't, right? So we just have to deal with today. So if you give yourself permission to just do your best, be mindful, notice what you're eating, notice the patterns, just play the game, really. And if you play the game with diligence and persistence, that's all anyone can ask. And so if we focus on that aspect, we can be perfect every day. And that is something we can do 100% of the time. And so we 100% win. And that just helps you bring down frustration, right? If you're winning it all the time and you're doing it right all the time, that feels good. So that's about expectation. 2 is a pause. So I think it's very typical and common for people to react to something when it happens, right? So your blood sugar's wrong, somebody says something to you that doesn't feel good, and we react, right? Like, why did you do that? Or darn it, I messed up again. You'll have these emotional responses. And one thing we can do to help with frustration is not react so fast. So it takes practice. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but the payoff is really, really good. So, if we can just think, take a breath, breathing. It's so easy and so obvious, but it's so helpful. And so when something happens and your immediate reaction is to get mad, take a moment. And I've said this many times, but anger and that reaction piece is it's a fight or flight response. So it's a neurological thing that you're doing. And B, it's always has to deal with an unmet need. So, maybe the need is to be perfect. I need my blood sugars to be perfect. When they're not, we get mad. I need other people to understand what I'm going through. When they don't and they say something silly, it makes you mad. I need my doctor to really tell me exactly what I need to do. They never do. You get mad, right? So we get in this balance of somebody says something, it doesn't meet our need, then we get mad and frustrated. So we can always choose to pause, literally pause, and kind of go back to persistence versus perfection. Can I really, really do this perfectly? Or have I really done the best I could? And if you've done your best, then you let it go. If you haven't, then you're like, it's an opportunity to think, like, what did I do wrong, right? Like, what could I have done differently? And instead of beating yourself up for not knowing everything, just learn from it, right? Okay, that's number 2. 3 is look for patterns. So when we're thinking about diabetes and all the stuff that we have to manage, we can't know the future and we can't mitigate every possible circumstance. But if we notice patterns and tendencies and what tends to work for us or not work for us, those are things we can typically intervene and do something on. So if your blood sugars are always running high in the morning or in the afternoon, or if you eat this food and it always has that sort of effect, those are things that we really should focus in on and see what we can do. So, document it, figure out what's going on, write some information down, talk to your doctor, things like that. But we do those with patterns because patterns are predictable, right? Patterns are something that tend to recur over time. The one-off, sometimes it just happens, and what do? We don't know. So those are the things, like, don't get frustrated by the one-offs. Just expect that some days there's going to be stuff that doesn't make sense. But when you start to notice a trend, then you go, okay, this is probably something I need to address. Last one is communication. So, if kind of going back to the 5 pillars of my coaching strategy, things I really think are important to have in your arsenal of tools. So 1 is understanding of diabetes, right? We have to know our meds and how it works. 2 is emotions. How do we deal with all this anger and frustration? 3 is motivation. What makes you decide to do it? Like, what is inside you that keeps you going? And if you haven't figured that out, that's a good thing to spend some time with, because when you figure out that, it makes it a lot easier. 4 is ownership, and that is really taking charge, feeling like you are responsible for your body, your health, your wellness, your decisions. You get to decide every day. And sure, you can take advice from people, but at the end of the day, it's your decision. And 5 is communication, which I brought this up. So my 4th little tip about frustration is communication. Again, we can get into that reactive space where someone says something and it triggers us, right? We just get so mad that they don't understand. They shouldn't be nosing in my business. I already did that. Why don't they know? There's just a lot of things that people can and will do. And honestly, most of them are trying to be helpful. Probably. They're thinking they're being helpful, whether they are or not. So what can you do to mitigate frustration? One thing we can do is come up with some replies. And I would advise you that instead of trying to answer their question, right? So if you think of throwing a dog a bone, they throw a bone, and when you answer their question, you run and chase it. And then you bring it back and you expect some result. Just because someone asks or comments doesn't require you to react. So one thing that you can do, if you don't feel, and some people you may want to have the discussion or the conversation with, but if you don't, one thing you can always do is to reflect back on them. So somebody is like, should you be eating that? Did you have enough carbs? When was the last time you saw your doctor? Whatever. Did you take your medicine today? All those things. Now, if you're not doing it, it might be somebody's really being helpful. But if it's just intrusive and it frustrates you, one really good strategy is to reflect it back on them, right? And we say, oh, it seems like you're concerned about me. Oh, it seems like you're wondering if I'm doing things right. Oh, it seems like you are. And you reflect what they seem to be worried about. Because on some level, it's them being worried. And so if we can acknowledge their concern, it makes them feel like they're heard, but we don't have to justify our behavior. Make sense? So, somebody's like, well, you don't look like you're diabetic, or, are you supposed to eat that? And what's your blood sugar? Did you, should you, would you, all those questions. And the best one is like, oh, I see you're concerned about me. And then they have to answer the question about why they're nosing in your business. So now, again, you have to use that with discretion. You don't want to put people off that are really trying to be helpful. But Boy, it can be frustrating when you're doing your best and you feel like somebody's judging you and just not getting it. So those are all very frustrating circumstances. I guess if you have some, I'd love to know what your frustrations are. But just to recap, so one is about expectations, right? So what are your expectations around yourself? And if we can focus on doing things persistently and always playing the game well and always being mindful and not worrying so much about perfection, that's very helpful because we can be persistent every day. We cannot be perfect every day. Pause. Again, things are going to trigger you. You're going to get upset. Take a breath and give yourself a moment before you run down and kind of tag on to that excitement, that fear, that frustration, that anger, and go with it. Give yourself a moment. Patterns, look at what you're going to react to. If it's a one-off and it never happens, let it go. If it's a consistent pattern or a trend, those are very good things to look at, discuss with your doctor, your educator, or adjust if you're doing your own adjustments. And then lastly, communication. Have a good reply so that when somebody says something to you, you can kind of redirect it back to them if it's frustrating for you. So those are just 4 tips. And again, they are founded on my principles of coaching, how I work with clients. So that is it for today. Dealing with frustration, have a strategy, have some tools in your tool belt. So a couple things, and I'm going to put a link below this post, but I have been doing some healing meditation. So if you're frustrated, if you're just tense and angst and you just aren't feeling it, I have done some meditations. They're free. You just listen to it. And it really just helps calm you. And it also is a guided sort of inventory of the parts of your body that are most affected by diabetes. And our actual mindset, what's going on in our unconscious and subconscious mind, can actually change our physical being. So it's a nice little gift to your body to hopefully balance some of the stress. So we have stress in our body, adding peace and healing is a good thing to do. And so that the meditation is good for that. And then the other thing is, I'll put another link below this as well, is I think it's a really good way to get engaged if you're not sure about all this. I have a 50-minute back on track meeting. And so we can get together over Zoom. We kind of talk about some really focused issues you are having, and we come up with some strategies. You know, it's not boiling the ocean or solving every diabetes problem, but if you've got some particular things that are really just keeping you from being where you want to be, let's talk about them, figure out like how to get around them. I have a bunch of tips, a bunch of experience, and my coach's training is all about that. How do you get over these things that are keeping you from your best? So those are 3 things today, right? So a meditation to do, you can engage with a back on track workshop. And then, just think about your strategy for frustration, because it will happen. That's one thing you can count on, is you will get frustrated with diabetes. And I guess I'll leave you with this. Now it's a game for me. So when I get frustrated, it's like, aha, I knew that was coming. I was right. And there's something about being right that makes you feel better. So cool. Well, thank you all for hopping on. I see some folks' names on there. I'd love to see people joining and leaving comments. It makes me feel great. And I would love to know your thoughts on kind of your struggles with diabetes, and I could do some future talks on, some of those things that bother you or get under your skin or you wish you could handle better. All right. So thanks again. My name is Patricia Dacre, and I am with Better Diabetes Life. And I'm a diabetes coach here to help you navigate your diabetes journey. Thanks so much.